answer the questions myself that I've been asking you. So my name is Mark Taylor. I grew up in a Christian Missionary Alliance church. I went to a Baptist church in high school and college. I went to a Baptist college, so I know where y'all Baptist people are coming from in large measure. That's sort of my background too. And then I also went to a non-denominational grad school for seminary, but it had Baptist roots, so I've kind of lived in that world for quite a while. And since then, I don't know, I guess sort of I've distanced myself from some aspects of that and kind of I've come into a broader, this started when I was in school and seminary, but come into kind of a broad and eclectic way of thinking about theology and reading scripture. And I think you'll see some of that come through throughout the semester, and hopefully it'll be good and helpful to you. And one kind of unique skill that I have that's kind of silly, but is that I'm really good at estimating volume. Like if you have leftovers in a pot, I can tell you what size container you need to contain them, and it won't be overly huge, and it will most likely fit. I also know how to paint pretty well. I just got back early yesterday morning from spending a week down at my sister's house, painting her house in Portland. It was kind of crazy, but we got it done, and so that's something I can do. Gosh, I haven't even thought about the question of what I would ask God, but maybe it's in a sense, God makes it pretty easy to know himself, to know him. I mean, for us to know him, not to know himself. But in another sense, it's really difficult because, well, he came embodied for a time, but he's not anymore. And even if he were, he was only in one place at once. So now he can be in us through the Spirit, but it's like sort of difficult to relate to somebody who's not embodied. And so how are we supposed to know you deeply and personally if we can't see you? I think today that's my question. So what I would like to do now is, if you have a Bible, or I could probably pull this up real quick on and screen share it. If you have a Bible, though, why don't you open it to Psalm 8. And that'll work. Now let's do... I'm going to do a little meditation exercise. How about ESV? Yeah, that's good. So I'm going to copy this real quick into a Word document. And I'll share it. So what I want you to do, you can look at your own Bible, or you can look at this on the screen, and just take a couple minutes and kind of dwell on it. We'll take maybe 3 or 4 minutes. You can read it through a couple times. If you're at your house and you want to read it out loud, and mute yourself and read it out loud, you can do that. And see what jumps out at you. See what you learn about God and about human beings. So we'll take a few minutes. Okay, how many of you have the text in? How many of you are looking at the screen and don't have the text in front of you? Ready? Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. It seems like most of you have a copy, which is good. You bring a copy of the Bible to class regularly, that will be helpful. And actually, if you don't have a paper copy and you want to pull it up on your phone, that'd be great. So tell me a few things. Maybe we'll take this in stanzas. First two verses, 3 and 4, 5 through 8, or 5 through 9. And we'll kind of I just want to hear some of the things you observed. If you're in the room, I'm going to mute the room. Well, if you're in the room and you want to talk through your phone, just let me know and I'll mute the room so that maybe we won't get that echo. So anybody who wants to shout out first, something that struck you from the first couple verses? Yes, Matthew.
The psalmist used David saying out of the mouth of babes and infants, God takes strength, uses strength through the weak. And this is the thing throughout the Bible. Those who are weak in man's eyes, God uses to show strength.
Yeah, excellent observation. And the praise that comes from those weak people stills the enemy and the avenger. So it's like it has this strange power to it. Good call. Okay, what else? You don't have to all talk at once. Yeah.
And in verse 1, who has set thy glory above the heavens? David is implying that no one can set your glory above the heavens. Only you, Lord, can. And only he can show how excellent his name is in the earth. No one else can do it for God. We can praise him, but only God can set his name above the heavens.
Good. So one of the things I'm going to work on this semester is the awkward silence. I was reading recently in a book about teaching that if you ask a question and you give like 3 seconds of awkward silence, it's not enough time for people to actually think about an answer. Um, so we'll have to get used to some longer stretches of awkward silence, but I think it'll be good in the long run. Okay, 1 and 2 are still fair game, but let's open it up. 3 and 4, anything that people observe in that section that you want to bring up to the rest of us? Yeah, Nicholas.
I have a question.
Sure.
The Zoom call failed for a second and I had to jump back in.
Sure.
I got stuck on verse 2. So is it okay if I jump in there?
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So, let's see. We're in 8. Where are you? Out of the mouth of babes and nursing infants, you have ordained strength. So I read that. And then what clicked was that out of the mouth of innocence, out of the mouth of innocence. And babies are dependent. They don't doubt ever. They just recognize safety. As Christians, when we recognize our safety, provision, and dependence on God, when we recognize that safety, it gives us strength, it builds our trust, and it solidifies our faith. And that's what I got for verse 2.
Cool. Yeah, that resonates a lot with what Matthew shared about the inherent weakness of babies and infants, and like this idea that they trust and they find security and safety. Yes, Hannah.
Let me know if you can't hear me. But I like that, like God uses the insignificant mouth of God to like reveal His majesty. It just kind of feels like a theme, like throughout the Bible. Like Jesus being born in a manger, and I just think that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's how we choose to display how cool He is.
Excellent. Yeah. I'm reminded of what Paul says in 2 Corinthians. In weakness, God is strong. God shows his strength. That is a key biblical theme. And it kind of continues actually in the next section. What's the contrast in verses 3 and 4?
Contrast is the vastness of the universe versus the insignificance of man.
Yeah, or at least the apparent insignificance.
Size.
I'm sorry, say that last sentence again.
The last thing I just said was right, and it's like this, just a size difference.
Okay, good.
Is in our minds often a size difference we always think of as importance difference, and God flips that on its head.
Sure. Yeah, so yesterday was my birthday, and my daughter gave me she made me a ring. It was made of like a key ring with a couple little pieces hot glued to it. And so it's pretty small, but she made a comment like, with this comes my love, right? And so it's this little thing, but there's a lot of meaning there. Timothy, you were going to say something.
Well, for one, doesn't that, could you,
Try again on your phone. Oh, shoot. Oh, and now I can't unmute the computer. Can one of you guys, can you go up and unmute the computer and talk into it, Timothy? Oh. Oh. Oh.
So, what I was going to say is, for one, that's adorable. For two, the whole verse 3 and 4 kind of makes you realize how huge it is that God cares about us. Because it's like if someone looked in their home and found every single dust mite and named every single dust mite and knew every single hair on every single dust mite and all their personalities. It's like that's what God does, and He provides for literally the smallest thing you can imagine that you can't even see. Comparatively, we don't even see the dust mites. We don't even think that they're there. That's what I thought about.
Yeah. We've got other stuff going on that we're too concerned about, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, back next time.
Cool, thank you. Maybe the last part will give us a little hint as to why that is. The question of verse 4, like, why do you pay attention? So what kind of thoughts do you have on the last half of the psalm? Yes, Matthew.
So 5 and 6 are an answer to the two questions in verse 4. 5 is an answer. And 6, that's why, because just a little lower than in my translation, the angels, or than the heavenly beings. Because God has put His image in us. We are made in His image, therefore conveying some of His glory and honor upon us.
Yes. So Matt said, if you didn't catch that, that 5 and 6 answer the questions of verse 4, and God cares for human beings because He's made us in His image, a little lower than the Elohim, the variously translated gods, angels, or heavenly beings. That's a discussion for another time, but it's an interesting one. And He's, in the next verse, given humans dominion over His creation. Now, I don't think that means that God doesn't care about the rest of the creation as much as He does us necessarily, but He's put us in a position of caring for and stewarding that. And so in that sense, it makes sense that God would pay attention to us, because we're the ones who are supposed to pay attention to whatever He's made, which He goes on to list. even the chameleons.
Yeah.
So, any other observations that people want to share at this point on anything in the psalm? Yeah, Nicholas.
I think
Okay.
that sorry.
No, it's okay. You can go. You can go.
Come back to Jocelyn.
I think when he says that we have authority, over all sheep and oxen, the beasts in the field, etc., etc., etc.
Etc. Yes.
He means I've given you discernment. I've given you understanding above all any other creature. And so therefore it's your charge to, you're superior to them to look after to look after them. And he's discernment and understanding.
Yeah, there's definitely a piece of, I think the Bible puts together wisdom and sort of authority and image of God and dominion. Like, if you're going to have dominion, the only way to do it effectively is to be wise, and part of that is discernment. So,
Yes.
yeah. Jocelyn.
That's pretty much what I was gonna say. So.
Okay. Is there a different spin on the same idea that you were thinking of, or?
Just kind of like that he trusts us enough to take care of the land that he created and that kind of a thing. So.
Okay. And I think that has something to do with the question that was asked earlier about why are we here? What's the point of all this? We do have a vocation, a calling, a job to do that as a human race, but also as individual people within that human race. And so I chose this psalm because it kind of puts some emphasis both on God himself and who he is and his majesty and glory, and also the nature of human beings, and what we are in relationship to him and what we're called to do and to be. And really, that's where we're going to spend the bulk of our time this semester in theology. We're going to be talking about some other things too, the nature of revelation and how God speaks and reveals himself, and also the nature of his kingdom and the good news about his kingdom that we're in this era called to proclaim. But at the heart of it, it's who is God and who are we, and hence, the name of the course, Theology, is, if you know a little Greek, or if you just have been around the humanities long enough, all the ologies are the studies of something, right? Anthropology is the study of human beings. Sociology is the study of society. Philosophy, actually, that's not one of them. Philosophy is the love of wisdom. But theology is the study of God, or words about God. So that's kind of what we're here to do. And what I would like to do now, which we have far less time to do this than we probably need, but that's okay. I will try to go fast. I'm going to kind of just walk us through the syllabus. I'll probably just hit some highlights, but kind of jumping off from what I just shared, it's worth quoting A.W. Tozer. What comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. Did I share the wrong window? Is the syllabus up on the screen, or is it different? Okay, good. Is it on the TV there? Is it big enough for you guys to see in the room?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Does it make any difference when I change the size of the window on my computer?
If you changed it, there's no difference.
Okay, cool. Okay, so Tozer, what comes to mind when we think about God as the most important thing about us? For this reason, the greatest question before the church is always God himself. And the most pretentious fact about any man is not what he at a given time may say or do, but what he in his deepest heart conceives God to be like. We tend by a secret law of the soul to move toward our mental image of God. This is not only true of the individual Christian, but the company of Christians that composes the church. Always the most revealing thing about the church is her idea of God, just as her most significant message is what she says about him or leaves unsaid, for her silence is often more eloquent than her speech. So if theology is speech about God or God talk, then what we're trying to do is understand the most significant message, according to Tozer, that we can understand, message about God. And I think that this is probably true. What we say about him or leave unsaid is very significant to ourselves personally and to the church. And I think that the part of the reason why we come up against some of the roadblocks that we do in as Christians in our particular cultural moment, and why the church struggles in certain ways that it does, is sometimes related to this silence, the things that we're missing, or the things that we just have wrong. So theology is a journey where we're always kind of cycling around and honing in on who God is actually in truth, because we start with, and until we see him face to face, until we know fully, as Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians, it's always going to be skewed. But the goal of a course like this is to sharpen and clarify our picture, so that it's a little more true to the reality of who he is by the end of our course than it is right now. And we all have blind spots. We all have things we don't know, or we've never heard, we've never thought about. And so hopefully you'll encounter some new perspectives. Hopefully some of the things that you know or think you know now will be confirmed, and some of them will be challenged, and it'll cause you to think about, how do I put this together? That's probably something like what I said in this course description. And I already told you we're going to talk about Revelation, the idea that God, does it show up when I highlight a word? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So the idea that God speaks and reveals himself. Theology proper is just the way of talking about the study of God within the broader discipline of theology. If you talk about Christian theology as a whole, you're talking about all kinds of little sub-ologies. And so if they want to talk about the study of the actual person and nature of God, they use that phrase, that term, theology proper. Anthropology, study of the human beings, and a word that I made up, gospelology, the study of the gospel. By the way, side note, I made a couple revisions to the syllabus this morning, and I deleted the one that's on Populi, and when I tried to upload the revision, it wouldn't take it. So I'll try that again after class, and hopefully it'll take it. If it doesn't, maybe it's basically the same. I just made a couple tweaks to the attendance policy and changed a wrong date in the calendar. So until I get this one up, the other one will do just fine. Hopefully you've had a chance to look over this, and the goals are pretty straightforward, I think. I want you to be able to talk about your theological beliefs. And I think also one of the things we're going to do is kind of write some belief statement type of papers, because I think the process of writing helps us understand better. And then it allows us to be able to communicate either in writing or verbally with people. So we want to be people who are able to talk about and share the good news about what we believe. And so going through the process of kind of thoughtfully articulating that as part of this course helps us cultivate that skill. We want to recognize, I mean, some people think theology, I don't know, maybe this isn't you guys, but I know there are people out there who kind of think of theology as some sort of dry, like ivory tower thing that people do that, you know, they're just spinning out ideas that really don't have any relevance on the ground, and you know, nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, some people, well, it always matters, like Tozer said. So bad theology matters just as much as good theology. It's just going to mess up our lives if in the world if we live by it. So we want to try to be constantly thinking about this connection between our doctrinal statements and our creeds and the things we're reading in theology books and the scripture and life. And part of that is this idea of tradition. Scripture and tradition and doctrinal theology are always in conversation, whether we realize it or not. You know, there's a lot of people who kind of have this notion that it's just me and my Bible, and I just read the Bible and create a biblical theology from that. But all of us are shaped by a tradition, whether we realize it or not. And so there's also 2,000 years of tradition of people who've been thinking about what Christian belief is and why it matters. And it's good for us to learn from them, because the next part of this one is that our theology is always contextualized. You guys kind of get this, you're millennials, right? Everybody has a perspective. Everybody lives in a moment. Nobody kind of has this objective bird's eye view of reality. So nobody's got the definition of something, but we don't either. And so that's why we learn along with a tradition that's been doing this for a long time, and we let that expose our blind spots and confirm the things that are good about our perspectives. And it's this kind of dynamic, really fascinating conversation. Explain how doctrines relate to each other. That's just kind of, if you change one thing in the system, it affects other things. And hopefully we'll see that over the course of this course. And along with, you know, learning from tradition and recognizing that it has value for us, engaging and learning from different voices and perspectives. I will try to, and some of the books that we're reading will, I hope, and some of the supplemental things that I have for you to read will maybe be perspectives that are a little different than what kind of you've grown up learning. And that's part of what I was just talking about, this idea that we need to see and learn from people who think about this in slightly different ways, and see how we can become more biblical in light of learning from them. So My philosophy on textbooks is this. I want you to read them. So I try to pick good ones. I try to pick, instead of one 600-page theology book that's an introduction that is usually somewhat dry, I try to pick several short books that are more lively and engaging. That's what you see here. The first book we'll read, if you don't have this, you should get it as soon as possible, is Kelly Kapic, A Little Book for New Theologians. It's 120 pages, and it's basically why do we do this thing called study theology is the question it's asking. We'll also read John Mark Comer, God Has a Name, when we study theology proper, the nature and character of God. John Mark is a pastor in Portland. He's young, he's hip, he's a really good writer. His book is engaging and funny, and it's clear. And it's not a typical theology textbook. It's not even in the academic imprint of Zondervan, but it's basically an unpacking of Exodus 34, where God reveals his name to Moses. Yahweh, Yahweh, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love. And to my mind, there's no better place to go to study God than what he says about himself. And I think John Mark Comer does a nice job of putting that in terms that are not dumbed down, but they're not highly technical either. And it's a fun read. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. Michael Reeves is kind of the same way. He's more of an academic. John Mark Comer is a pastor and a communicator. But Michael Reeves is an excellent communicator too. I mean, he's very clear. But this is more like kind of a theology text, but it's very lively. I encourage you at some point, in fact, I might even have it on the syllabus, go on YouTube and listen to Michael Reeves. He's British. He's got this wonderful accent and this great kind of gregarious way of speaking. He's very passionate. That comes through in his writing too, but it's nice to hear his voice. And this book helps us recover the implications of putting the Trinity at the center of theology, and which in my own journey in the last several years has been hugely important. So part of it is I just want to share that with you, and part of it also is it's a really good introduction to some of the key things that we want to talk about. Back up here to this idea of reading with tradition and understanding how we get from scripture to life in theology. That's Scott McKnight, the Blue Parakeet. I won't say much more about that, except another good author, and I feel like an engaging read. So these two are more like very these two are both beginner level theology overview texts. So if you're newer to like Christian faith or don't know a lot of the kind of theological language, then it might not hurt to pick up one of these or go to the Gather for Him library, for a little while each day. I think they're on reserve, so you can't take them home, but you could spend some time in the relevant chapters as we go through. There's a select few chapters that I'll assign from these, but so you guys can go pull them off the shelf and scan copies or whatever. But they're not required. I used them in previous years, and so I keep them on here just because I think they're really helpful. General introductions that don't get bogged down in lots of details. But there you have it. Okay, now we have 7 minutes. So I think what I'll do, yeah, this is actually good because this will give me a chance to talk to you about our first assignment, which is on the little book for new theologians. So there's A, B, and C. There's basically 3 categories of assignments in this class. One is interactions with reading, because as I said before, the reason I pick the texts and the reason I do a lot of the assignments that I do is because I want you to read them, because I think the books we read shape our souls. And so I try to pick good books, and I try to create an evaluation structure that doesn't allow you to just skip the reading and still succeed in the class. Because I think the reading is an integral part of your formation, both intellectually and spiritually. So the first assignment is to summarize Capek's book and respond to it. So basically, one of the things you guys have all, most of you are second year, so you've taken college writing. This is not a research paper. It's not like I guess it could be a 5-paragraph essay if you made it that, but it's not so much like that in the sense of I have a thesis that I'm trying to propose and prove and argue. There's 2 things I want you to do. One is tell me what he said. That's this. Summarize. And then reflect or respond personally to that. So the summary is the accountability piece. You couldn't very well summarize the book if you didn't read it. So I want you to do that. And I think that also is a really good exercise for, if you really want to know what an author is saying, then summarize the book. There's a great book by Mortimer Adler called How to Read a Book. And he argues that if you want to understand the argument of an author, take notes and summarize. So one piece is summarize. That doesn't have to be terribly long. I mean, the whole thing's only 600 words. That's like, I don't know, 3 pages or something. So, by the way, if you want to know how long your paper is, review, select all, word count, 5,729 words. So you don't have to count them all. Most of you probably already knew that, but it took me years before I did, so just thought I'd throw that out there. So part 1 is summarize. Maybe about half the paper you could use to summarize, and then tell me how that affects how his book affects you. Where are you sitting in this? He'll kind of talk about this pilgrimage that we go through of theology. Where do you find yourself in that? Are you excited? Are you apprehensive? Are you confident? Are you unsettled? Because, whatever. Just give me some personal response. That's all it is. It's pretty non-threatening, I think. And then the rest of the reading, what we'll do, and I haven't developed all the questions for these yet, but because we're sort of hybrid in class online madness, we're just going to do discussion posts on Populi. So for every chapter, I'll throw up like a question that I think gets at one of the core concepts in the chapter or kind of the main idea. And I'll ask you for a comment. And then I'll have you comment or reply to a couple of the posts of the other people in the class. So it's a way to just generate some thinking ahead of class time about what we've read and kind of see where others in the class are too as you're reading their comments. And I've only done this once in the past, but I felt like it was helpful for kind of priming the pump so that when we get to class, we already kind of have a conversation going and we can continue that. So that's big category number one. Big category number two for assignments is the belief statements. And we'll talk more about these down the line, but it's basically for each of those major topics, anthropology, theology proper, revelation, you'll write a short essay where you kind of state, where am I at with this doctrine? What do I think needs to be said about it? There's some question prompts that'll help you do that. And then the third major category is something in this course hopefully will perk your interest, and you'll say, I want to learn, I want to study that some more. As you look ahead, like on the front end, this looks like something I would, when we get there, I would want to dive more deeply into. And so you'll do some kind of supplemental research papers on those two topics of your choice. And there's more thorough instructions about that too that I'll go over in the near future. So that's what it looks like. Reading responses. The rumblings are the theological topic papers, and the ruminations are the last one that I just said about two topics. So it's time to end. Most of the rest of this is just the standard stuff, so I'm not going to go through it in detail. What I would like you to do as your first homework is start reading Kelly Kapik's book. By the way, this is one of the changes I made. I moved the Aquinas reading to next Thursday instead of Tuesday. So you can start it if you want, but we'll discuss it maybe not tomorrow, or I mean maybe not Tuesday. But I'll tell you, it is here. Did I just not save changes? Oh, I have to stop share. It's in Populi, the PDF of Aquinas. So when you need it, files, right there, under files. So if you're ambitious and you want to read it for Tuesday, that's great, because we will kind of cover that topic, but it's one of the more challenging things you'll read, so I kind of wanted to introduce it, and I knew I wouldn't have time to do that today. So you can read it anytime in the next week. And I'll try to create a discussion post for it. That was the other thing. I haven't done that yet, so I was going to wait and have you, I'll assign it Tuesday. So if you have questions at this point and you want to stick around for a minute and ask them, that's great. Otherwise, thank you all. It was nice to learn a little bit about you, and you're welcome to sign off at this point unless you want to ask a question. Peace out.
I have a question. Could you please email the syllabus? I tried to download it today, but that's before you were able to upload the new one. So could I get a copy of the new one?
Yes, I will. Like I said, I'll try again to upload it, and then I'll also send it as an email attachment.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep. Oh, so I was, like most of us, confused about how this is all going to play out, and I probably will start coming in to the room for those of you who are there, and if any of the rest of you can get there, that's great. It might take me a few days to get there, though. I have my in-laws are here, and they're in the vulnerable category, and so I'm limiting exposure right now, but that will be a temporary thing. And also, I need to keep having conversation with my wife. She doesn't want me to go in for some reason, so we'll see how that plays out. But also, we'll see if it keeps working for the school to be open So stand by for news.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all. Yeah, Nicholas, did you have a question?
Yeah. So for Kelly's book, you said you wanted us to get started reading that. Is there a specific chapter you'd like us to go to? Like
just the beginning. The book, the whole book. I don't know if you have it yet. It's pretty small and short. But so Thursday, in like a week and a half is when the written responses due, and that's the whole book. So you can just start reading.
Okay.
Does that help? Does that clarify?
Yeah.
Okay. Tim, did you have a question? Okay. Cool. Did you need anything, Daniel? Are you just hanging? Okay. All right, guys. Thank you very much. We'll look forward to further sessions.